Welcome to the Religious Studies Podcast. Today, we're diving into the incredible spiritual world of Greenland. It's a story of ancient spirits, dramatic encounters, and a faith that has been completely transformed over time. So, let's get right into it. I mean, this quote just nails the traditional Inuit worldview, doesn't it? It wasn't just about the physical world you could see and touch. There was this entire other dimension, this invisible world, that was just as real and had a huge impact on daily life. The key to survival? Keeping those two worlds in harmony. Okay, so to really get this worldview, we have to start with the absolute basics. Let's meet the spirits and the forces that really shaped every single aspect of traditional Greenlandic life. At the very heart of this belief system is the Inua. You can think of it as a life force or a spirit that's inside literally everything. Not just animals and plants, but rocks, the weather, even abstract ideas. One of our sources even mentions a Greenlander saying that the Inua of sleep had come over him. It just goes to show how alive and conscious they believed their entire world was. Now, humans were seen as a little different. They had two distinct souls. First, you have the Tarnag, the life soul. That's one that would go to an afterlife when you died. But then there was the Atek, the name soul. This was tied to your actual name and your personality. And this soul could be passed on to a newborn, which is this really powerful form of reincarnation that kept a person's essence alive in the community. And kind of governing everything was this huge, all-encompassing force called Sila. It's a tricky word to translate, but you can think of it as, well, cosmic balance. It was the weather, the air, consciousness itself. And the most important thing to know about Sila is that it had to be kept in balance by how people behaved. If you broke taboos, Sila would react, and not in a good way. We're talking storms, famine, total chaos. So, in a world that's this spiritually complex, right? How did people actually navigate the boundary between what they could see and what they couldn't? Well, they needed a specialist, a middleman, who could walk between both worlds. And that specialist was the shaman, known as the Angakok. Becoming one was, let me tell you, an absolutely dramatic and grueling ordeal. It was this long journey that ended in a symbolic death and rebirth. Get this, the sources describe how an apprentice would be ritually eaten and then spit back out by a powerful bear spirit. This terrifying process was what made them luminous, giving them the supernatural ability to see and travel into the spirit world. And the shaman's work was incredibly dangerous. This quote from the explorer Knut Rasmussen describes a shaman's soul journey to the powerful sea mother. See, when people broke taboos, the spiritual filth of their actions would literally tangle her hair, which trapped all the sea animals and caused starvation. So the Angakok had to make this terrifying trip to her home under the sea, physically fight her, and comb the filth out of her hair to release the animals and save everyone. But you know, keeping the cosmos in balance wasn't just a job for the shamans. Everyday life, especially hunting, was wrapped up in this complex web of rituals. It was absolutely critical to respect an animal's soul so it would choose to return. For example, when a polar bear was hunted, its head was brought into the home for a 5-day ritual, all to make sure its soul got home safely, ready to be reborn and hunted again. So you have this ancient spiritual system, tuned over centuries to the rhythms of the Arctic, and it was about to face a challenge that would change everything. In the 18th century, Christianity arrived. It all started in 1721, when the Danish Norwegian priest Hans Egede showed up, determined to convert the Inuit to Lutheranism. But he wasn't alone for long. By 1733, another Protestant group, the Herrnhuters, arrived with their own mission. So suddenly, Greenlanders weren't just being introduced to one new religion, they were getting two different versions of it. And this immediately created a direct clash of spiritual authorities. On one side, you have the Angakok, whose job is to solve immediate, real-world problems like famine through intense soul journeys. On the other, you have the priest, whose authority comes from a book and who offers a more abstract spiritual salvation. It was a collision of two completely different ways of understanding the world. And you can imagine the missionaries faced enormous challenges. I mean, just think about it for a second. How do you even begin to explain a concept like sin to a culture that has no word for it, no framework for it at all? The same problem came up with words like God, grace, and hell. These weren't just language barriers, they were deep cosmological divides. So what happens when these two worlds collide? Well, it's not what you might think. The result wasn't a simple replacement of one religion with another. Instead, something totally unique emerged, a new Greenlandic faith. In religious studies, we have a name for this process. It's called synretism. It's the growing together of different traditions. And Greenland is a textbook example of how bits and pieces from Inuit cosmology and Protestant Christianity started to merge and create a new hybrid spiritual expression. And you can see this happening in some really fascinating ways. The sources talk about people using pages from Christian hymn books as protective amulets in their kayaks, doing the exact same job as a traditional charm. And that custom of passing on the name soul, it continued, but now it happened right alongside a Christian baptism. Of course, the Danish officials saw this and worried. To them, it just looked like superstition, like the Greenlanders weren't getting true Christianity. But really, it was them making this new faith their own. Okay, so let's fast forward. After centuries of all this transformation, what does the spiritual landscape of Greenland actually look like today in the 21st century? Let's take a look. So if you just look at the numbers, yeah, the Lutheran Church is dominant. But that number, it really doesn't tell the whole story. Because simmering just under the surface is this powerful, growing interest in reconnecting with traditional Inuit spiritual heritage. This interest is deeply connected to the search for a modern national identity. It really got going back in the 1970s with cultural movements like Asivik, which brought back practices like traditional drum dancing and storytelling. Reconnecting with this spiritual past became a powerful way to define what it means to be Greenlandic in the modern world. And wow, this quote from the musician Rasmus Liberth just captures that feeling perfectly. He talks about rediscovering traditional drum rhythms not as a rejection of his Christianity, but as a connection, an invisible umbilical cord back to his ancestral culture. For so many people, faith is this personal blend, a way of holding both of these worlds at the same time. Which leaves us with a really profound question, and not just for Greenland, but for all of us. In our increasingly modern world, what role do the spirits of the past play in a modern faith? Greenland's story seems to show us that they don't just disappear. They adapt, they transform, and they continue to find new meaning. Thank you for joining this explainer from the Religious Studies podcast. Please follow us and consider giving a 5-star rating so our explainers can reach even more people.